This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth with breaking news. There is now talks that the Russians are planning a false flag attack to be launched against Ukraine, and I believe that this in and of itself is a false flag attack being launched against the Russians, and this is being perpetuated by NATO in cahoots with the Biden administration. So this is exactly what we're going to talk about today in this video, guys, so let's just jump right into it. Ukraine was hit by a massive cyber attack, and the hackers warned the country to be afraid and expect worse. The attack comes as Russia is massing 100,000 troops near Ukraine's border, and this happens on the same day, guys, that Russia says it just shut down the notorious REvil ransomware group. Russia's FSB has arrested members of REvil, a ransomware group responsible for many cyber attacks across the US last year, including the Kessia attack. Amid the arrests, the FSB seized millions of dollars in cash and assets. So which is it, guys? Are the Russians actively taking down hackers? Are they right now actively arresting cyber criminals, or are they actively engaging in their own cyber attacks against Ukraine? Well, according to Politico, guys, this is exactly what they are planning on doing, as US intel suggests that Russia is planning a false flag operation. The Biden administration has information indicating Russia might soon launch a false flag operation to provide a pretext for an invasion of Ukraine, a U.S. official told Politico, guys. So we're going to talk about all that and much, much more in this video. But before we do, I'd ask that you check me out at patreon.com/pressfortruth. This is where you can sign up for a monthly reoccurring contribution if you do appreciate my efforts to continuously bring you this information, guys. I currently have 116 patrons right now. If we could get 4 more today, that would be awesome. Let's get us up to 120 patrons. Guys, if you do appreciate my efforts once again to continuously bring you this information, please check the links in the description below to where you can find me here on Patreon. All right, I think we should start this video perhaps by defining some terms, because I've been teaching my audience here at Press for Truth what false flags are all about for over 20 years now, but there are new people signing up to this channel all the time who may not be familiar with such terms. So let's just start by explaining that a false flag is a term that was derived from the military, and it's when you have a political enemy that you want to attack, but because of public relations issues, you can't launch an attack that's unprovoked. You know, the people wouldn't be behind such a thing. So what you do is you launch a false flag operation, and this is the idea that you would fly the flag of your political enemy, let's say on an airplane, and you crash it into yourself. You crash it into your own country so that you can say, look at what they just did. Meanwhile, this was all you doing it to yourself, but you pin the blame on your political enemy. Now you have the backing of the people to say, yes, of course we need to go over there. Look what they did. Let's go get them. That, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, is what a false flag is. And now, as we enter into the 21st century, we're venturing into the area of cybersecurity and cyber false flags. You may recall, guys, it was last summer I put out this video. Ransomware hackers strike again, demanding $70 million in Bitcoin just days before the cyber Polygon simulation. A group of, quote, Russian-speaking, quote, hackers are being blamed for a massive ransomware attack affecting hundreds of corporate companies who must pay $70 million in order to regain access to their data. Recently, JBS, a beef company, paid out $11 million in BTC to these, quote, hackers, which took down one of the largest suppliers of beef in the world. Meanwhile, the World Economic Forum is gearing up to launch their annual Cyber Polygon training exercise, which simulates a breakdown in global supply chains. In this video, Dan Dix of Press for Truth speaks with Derek Brose of the Conscience Resistance about this, quote, recent hack, who he believes is truly behind it, and most importantly, what you need to do to prepare for the inevitable. And in this video, indeed, we get into exactly who is behind these things, and you'll find out it's the Israelis, it's secret illegal wings within the intelligence communities in the U.S. It's NATO, and this is all being pinned on the greatest scapegoat of the 21st century, the Russians. That's exactly what I said just the other day, or was that this morning, I guess, on Twitter. Talk of a Russian false flag on Ukraine is actually a false flag on Russia. The Russians officially win the award for the biggest scapegoats of the 21st century. So let's take a look at specifically that, guys. They are now pinning this idea that the Russians are going to launch a false flag operation on Ukraine. But as I said, and which we will explain, I believe this is being led by NATO and the US purposefully to pin the blame on the Russians for such a thing. As we see here, as per the official, Russia has already placed a group of operatives trained in urban warfare and in using explosives in eastern Ukraine. The intel suggests that this group might carry out acts of sabotage against Russia's own proxy forces, thereby providing the Kremlin a convenient excuse to send some or all of its 100,000 troops stationed outside of Ukraine over the border. The Russian military plans to start these activities several weeks before a potential invasion, which is estimated to begin sometime between mid-January and mid-February, the official continued. We saw this playbook back in 2014, and it's funny how these sources that leak this intel are always anonymous. You know, there's never a face or a name to this so-called intelligence. And can you really take it from the Biden administration, guys? The intelligence community and the Biden administration to believe they're telling the truth about a false flag with Russia? Well, we're going to get into why you can't trust them. Top U.S. officials, including National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, in recent days previewed that the U.S. had information suggesting that Moscow was setting the groundwork for another incursion. Russia is laying the groundwork to have the option of fabricating a pretext for an invasion, including through sabotage activities and information operations by accusing Ukraine of preparing an imminent attack against Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. This is what Sullivan told reporters at the White House on Thursday, promising that the administration would share more details within the following 24 hours. Well, guys, as I was, going over all this, looking at the inconsistencies between the ideas that the Russians are shutting down the notorious REvil ransomware hacking group, while at the same time being accused that they are behind this cyber attack in Ukraine and in fact are planning a false flag attack operation against Ukraine, I came across this article, guys, which basically I couldn't have said it better myself. So as I'm, doing the research for this video and preparing, what exactly I want to say about this, I came across this by Blue Apples, and it basically lays it out exactly how I would, and probably does a better job. So let me just break it down for you, what I found here, because I think this pretty much nails it. It says here, as far as diplomacy with Russia goes, citing anonymous sources has never stopped the U.S. from increasing hostilities between the two nations, whether it's to impeach a president, impose sanctions, or to enforce a larger military presence on its border. The breadth of instances using unfounded assertions made by the U.S.-EU axis for those proposing has become innumerable. In its latest iteration of this, U.S. intelligence sources are increasing the already strained relationship with Russia by tactily acknowledging a tactic which it has declared as a figment of conspiracy theorists' imaginations anytime they have faced similar accusations. And isn't that so funny and so true? I've been talking about the use of false flag operations by criminal elements within the intelligence communities for over 2 decades now. And just the word false flag operations triggers people to say, oh, that's just conspiracy stuff. That's conspiracy nonsense. In fact, anytime I've pinned, legit false flags against the U.S. and in particular the Biden administration, the response has always been, that's just wild conspiracy theory. Well, now they're openly talking about the idea that the Russians are going to engage in a false flag attack against Ukraine, but that's not a conspiracy theory. Only when we say it is. It's absolutely ridiculous, but let's continue. Citing the familiar source of an unnamed U.S. official, once again, quite convenient that these sources are always anonymous, when it comes to the criminal elements within the intelligence communities. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan remarked that leaks conveyed the Russian government is on the precipice of launching a false flag as a pretext to invade Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki expounded upon the revelations made by Sullivan, stating that Russian operations were attempting to fabricate Ukrainian provocations in state and social media to justify a Russian intervention. The anonymous source stated that the clandestine fabrication of a cause for war would be conducted by covert Russian operatives in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine that has become the formative battleground between NATO and the Kremlin. And now we're starting to hone in on who the real perpetuators of this false flag is. Ironically, this announcement preceded a widespread hack of Ukrainian government websites that's already and unsurprisingly being accused of being a Russian cyber warfare attack. Accordingly, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg expressed that NATO would expedite its efforts to further ingratiate Ukraine into its axis. Though talks of full-fledged membership have not been taken back up, Stoltenberg stated that in the coming days, NATO and Ukraine will sign an agreement on enhanced cyber cooperation, including Ukrainian access to NATO's malware information sharing platform. We would go on to offer insight into the current state of the partnership between Kyiv and NATO, saying NATO has worked closely with Ukraine for years to help boost its cyber defenses. NATO cyber experts in Brussels have been exchanging information with their Ukrainian counterparts on the current malicious cyber activities. Curiously, as I was pointing out earlier, it doesn't make any sense, Russian government officials also broke news regarding the landscape of cybercrime operations already occurring within its borders. Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, announced that it defeated a hacking group named REvil. That hacking group was behind a U.S. software firm, leading to increased calls from Washington for Russia to stop this criminal activity. The point of discussion was a prominent part of discussions between U.S. President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. Russia's FSB officials conveyed that this initiative was taken at the behest of the U.S. authorities. So they are saying that they're doing this at the behest of the U.S., right? So the FSBC effort seized over 425 million rubles. That's the equivalent to about $5.5 million or 4.8 million euros. Despite the apparent cooperation of the U.S. and Russia in the cyber warfare countermeasures, any veneer of reconciliation between the two nations is sure to be shattered following the hack of the Ukrainian government IT infrastructure, right? So, yeah, the Russians did exactly what the U.S. was hoping they would do in shutting down REvil. So, you know, they're working with them here on this, but all of that is going to be undone because of this now cyber attack on Ukraine, which is being pinned against the Russians. How convenient that it happens on basically the same day that the Russians shut down REvil. Goes on to say here, perhaps Jake Sullivan, and this is the part that really nails how the U.S. and NATO would benefit from painting the picture that the Russians are trying to pose a false flag on Ukraine. So let this sink in, guys. Perhaps Jake Sullivan doth protest too much, and the allegations of Russian-backed cyber efforts being behind the Ukraine hack are a false flag effort on behalf of NATO and its interests in and of themselves. As the U.S. Senate battles to circumvent a filibuster, preventing the imposition of sanctions against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, stoking the once fervent fires of anti-Russian sentiment could be a valuable tool in overcoming that hurdle. And there you have it, guys. NATO directly benefits from this. The U.S. and Biden administration directly benefits from the idea that the Russians are to have the blame pinned on them for apparently launching their own false flag attack against the Ukrainians. While an act of cyber warfare could be contrived as casus belli, or basically just an act that's worthy of, prompting war. The appearance of covert military operations in Donbass surely carries more weight. Eastern Ukraine has become the proverbial Berlin Wall of the Neo-Cold War. In recent months, Russian forces have conducted drills along its border with Ukraine. Those exercises have been characterized as a provocation of war, although that military presence of approximately 175,000 troops was removed from the region following their withdrawal in the final weeks of 2021. And really, what the Russians do with their troops on the border of Ukraine within their own country is their own business. They're within their own country, operating their own military operations, and for them to say that's a provocation of war is nonsense. In the time since that de-escalation, which they did, NATO has begun approaching Russian territories in the Arctic, freezing any sense of tension between the two thawing. That withdrawal followed calls from Putin to guarantee that NATO would not expand further towards Russia's borders. Here we go, guys. Now we're getting to the crux of the matter. In recent vintage, the premise of Georgia joining NATO has also become a contentious point between Russia and the U.S. During the confirmation hearing of current U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Senator Rand Paul contextualized the gravity of the ramifications that would follow any such agreement by stumping the then nominee as to whether or not it would constitute an act of war against Russia under current international law. Both the hack on Ukrainian government websites and the purported military intel warning of a Russian false flag come following the end of a meeting with NATO. Admiral Rob Bauer characterized the diplomatic effort as largely inconsequential. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov took a much more ominous tenor state, saying, "We have run out of patience. The West has been driven by hubris and has exacerbated tensions in violation of its obligations and common sense. With the mounting news of Russian hostilities once again taking center stage, U.S. officials risk their allegations being the straw that breaks the camel's back. If push comes to shove, the Donbass will assuredly be the theater that stages that tragedy." So again, really, really good stuff here from Blue Apples. This is a Zero Hedge article. Links to all this stuff is going to be located in the description below, guys. But as I said, we can't take it from the anonymous, U.S. intelligence sources who are claiming that the Russians are going to launch a false flag attack against Ukraine. They are already working with the intelligence communities to take down the REvil hacking groups, but that's all being thwarted and is all for nothing now that the blame is being pinned on them for this cyber attack. And what I think all this is really preparing for us for, guys, and gearing us up for, is the big one. As I pointed out in this, the next false flag will be a cyber attack on global supply chains, cyber polygon exposed. And that's the important takeaway to remember about with this video, guys. In October of 2019, the World Economic Forum, the WEF, organized a simulation called Event 201 to test what a global reaction to a global pandemic might look like just a few months before the exact same scenario played out in real life. Well, now the WEF, along with Russia's Sberbank and its cybersecurity subsidiary Bastyon, have announced that they will be running a new simulation called Cyber Polygon, which simulates a supply chain cyber attack similar to the recent SolarWinds hack that would assess the cyber resilience of the exercise's participants. In this video, Dan Dix of Press for Truth speaks with James Corbett of the Corbett Report about the upcoming Cyber Polygon simulated event, how society is being conditioned for a real cyber attack to come, and most importantly, what you can do about it now to protect yourself and your family from this coming cyber catastrophe. And I hate to sound so alarmist, guys, but this is what they are planning: a global cybersecurity attack that will eventually shut down global supply chains. And they're already setting up the big bad scapegoat the Russians, the big bad scapegoat of the 21st century. Guys, please get this information out. It's all swirling around the airwaves right now that the big bad Russians are planning a false flag attack. This in and of itself is a false flag. And when we know that they're planning on launching the big one, Cyber Polygon, to break down global supply chains, that should be a big red flag for you to know that, guys, it's time to get yourself prepared. Global supply chains are going to be breaking down. These cyber attacks are going to be coming from NATO and the criminal elements within the intelligence communities. But hopefully for you, the viewers of this channel, it's not going to matter much, because you're already going to be in a position where you're not reliant on the supply chain. You have a self-sustainable garden on your private property. You are no longer in debt, so you are not beholden to the banks, and you are no longer in need of anything from the government. You become completely self-sustainable, self-reliant, and therefore the number one enemy of the powers that ought not to be. That's what we need to focus on moving forward, guys. It's those of us who have stepped outside of this whole system, who are moving towards being completely self-sustainable. We are the true enemies of the global powers that ought not to be. So continue to be a threat. Work on your garden. Work on getting out of debt. Work on stepping outside of this pyramidal structured system. Because when enough of us do that, the entire thing comes crumbling down. And that's what I hope to see in the near future, guys. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, guys, today. Beware of the coming global cyber security attacks. And again, when we see anonymous sources within the U.S. intelligence communities claiming that the Russians are planning a false flag attack, you should know that that in and of itself is a false flag against the Russians. And again, it's all mainly for the purposes of geopolitical control. Guys, if you appreciate my efforts to bring you this information and to counter the propaganda that we're all being bombarded with, once again, please click that thumbs up button. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and your family, and check out the links in the description to where you can find us here on Patreon. Patreon.com/pressfortruth. You can sign up, again, for a monthly reoccurring contribution. Let's try to get that number up from 116 to 120 today, guys. Can I get 4 more people to sign up to Patreon today? If that's something you're interested in, check the links in the description below. And that's all for today, guys. I want to thank you once again for tuning in. We're going to have more video reports coming very soon. Thanks for watching. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free.